distinguished panel to take your questions and mine. Starting on your left, we have Richard Faubert, who is, who are you? You're that guy. I can't read name tags from this far, but he is the localization guy for QA in software development at Cisco. And we have Loic Dufresne from Intel. Did I say any of that right?
Loic is correct, Intel was correct. Just to say Loic from Intel is probably okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can't say my last name correctly either, probably.
Well
So.
done. Take a picture.
Yeah. We got Asnes, CEO of Lingoport, Texin. You have already met. Localization guy at Rearden Commerce.
I-18
I-18 guy, okay. And we have Bredenkamp, CEO of Acrolinx. Brief word from our sponsor. Today's event is provided, sponsored, etc., organized by Acrolinx and Lingoport. So thank you. We owe them our drinks. So be nice to them if you see them backstage. I'm going to throw a softball to you, Andrew. What is the role of content quality? And why should more people be standing up?
I'm amazed that there aren't more people standing up, to be honest. I think the general issues around quality sounds generally like a nice to have, and I think people think that if we've got some time left after we finish doing our actual jobs, we might take quality seriously. But in fact, what I'm talking about when I'm talking about quality is more all the things that are slowing you down in actually getting your job done. So it's not a luxury. It's actually reducing friction in the process and making your the whole process of getting your job done more predictable, more efficient, more effective. And so perhaps it would be useful to think a little bit more about what people mean by quality when they say they don't have quality issues, or they don't see quality issues affecting their work, because I would be very, very surprised if that were true. What we see in every complex process, especially complex engineering processes, especially once they go global in any way, is that the slightest issue in the way the content is set up in the system. This doesn't have to be large documents. It can be one string in a document, in a piece of content, piece of product, will cause a knock-on effect that becomes exponential the more markets you go into. And it's kind of like preparing yourself for the future to some extent, that you know that you will go into those markets in the future, and if the product's not ready for it, if your strings aren't localizable, you know that you're going to have a problem later once you start to localize. If you've already got all your strings localizable, then every new market you go into, without addressing quality issues, every new market you go into will cost you 20 to 30% more than it needs to. However much you have translation memories and all those things for your existing markets, every time you want to go into a new market, then all the quality issues, I mean in the broadest sense of quality, all the issues you have that are slowing you down, from our experience with working with global product companies, is that a new market will cost you 20 to 30% more than it should do if you're not addressing quality issues in the content.
I see panelists nodding. Richard, what's your experience with that at Cisco?
Not that's explicitly doing it that way. We're getting it pretty new at the telepresence part, and from going through and getting ready to come up with a localized product, we find all kinds of problems like that involved. And getting them at the front end when we're getting ready to localize is the right time to find them.
So I think part of the problem is it's outside your sphere of influence. So getting developers to externalize strings and the like, it's a must-have, right? And that's pretty clear. But then going to the content creators and getting them to respect your needs, it's not an absolute must-have, and there's distance between the localization managers and the content creators. And you take a look at the org chart, the further apart you are, sibling-wise, depending on how many levels up you have to go to cross over to where the content creators are, that much harder to get the problem. It's always kind of amazed me that the content creators and the localization folks weren't all in the same organization. It should be just one symbiotic system, but it isn't, and because they're not, it's very hard to influence that. So somehow you have to get companies like Andrew's connected to the content guys and get them to understand that they should do this not because just of localization, although it's a pretty good argument for productivity and cost, but because they'd like to improve their quality and their consistency. That's where the case should be made. But when the Loic folks make the case, they're talking across the wall and people are going, I've got other priorities. And the other thing is, the execs often don't care about the language. They don't care about the quality of the text. So if they think you're talking about how the strings are worded, things like that, most of the execs and the product managers, I got bigger fish to fry. I've got real bugs, I've got sales issues, and these language things are either after the fact or they're not showing up in sales situations. So it's not as strong an issue for them.
Yes. So, I'll stand. So we're talking about quality, so let me ask quality
Might be a
questions.
good practice to state name and company so we know.
Virel, BMC. So, and in talking about quality, let's be honest, in this room, the definition of quality is changing in many ways today. We live in a wiki world. I know in our company we're moving all of our content to a wiki environment. The writing rules are a little bit different. We're living in a, when you look at your translation options, maybe not crowdsourced, but maybe post-edit machine translation, maybe something else. And to be perfectly frank, the definition of quality is a little bit lower in many instances than it used to be 10 or 20 years ago. So, how do you define and control good enough quality?
We have a QI guy right here on the panel. What do you think, Richard?
Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to try to address this one a little bit, because I see, for example, for us, I would agree with you, if it's a wiki content that's generated by somebody somewhere, I don't necessarily care if it's perfect English.
No, internal wiki,
Internal,
as a publishing
even-
framework.
if what we get is content from an agency that we contracted with to get a nice looking marketing brochure, I think we make a big disservice to ourselves where we do not expect from that company, and we do not specify this as a requirement, that I want this content to be well done and localizable. When you give me an InDesign file, PowerPoint file, and the stuff is totally a total hack in terms of how it is laid out, and I cannot do anything with it, I have to basically rewrite the entire thing, reformat everything every time I translate it, and I spend 2, 4, 10 times the effort that I need compared to what I would have to do if it was well done initially. But we never requested it. We never actually explained to the company that developed that content what we expect from them, what we want. That was never a requirement, so we can't really go back and ask for it. It's too late. We got what we asked for, and now we have to deal with it. So we have a lot more education to kind of move into, to tell to those creative agencies that we work with, for example, hey, what I mean by a marketing document is something that I can take into 12 languages without extra work on my end. If you make my life miserable, I won't work with you in the future. But we never do this. For some reason, we don't want to be that hard on our providers. We have to. But we need to tell them what it is that we want, and then we can enforce it.
I'd say,
I was going to say, if I'm looking at quality, I look at the effect on sales and support. And in particular, if I can reduce support calls and I can somehow show that, then I can make the case that it's important. So I would look for those kind of metrics. There's a question in the back as well. I'm not sure if you can see.
I agree. I'd just like to say, I think the definition of quality has changed. I don't think it's got lower. I think it's got more differently defined than it used to be. And I'm really with Tex on this. I think I don't really care very much about a kind of abstract notion of quality. I think when we're talking to people about quality, we're talking about are you getting what you want done with this content, whether it's a UI string or a piece of embedded help or a message, or whether it's a topic in some other repository, or whether it's a user-generated piece of content. The point is, does that help, does it improve the customer experience? Does it help the customer get the information they need faster? If it's written in language that's appropriate for them, then that's fine. But then all sorts of other quality issues become important, like the findability of that piece of content becomes critical. As you start to distribute across the web, and you get user-generated content, and you start to machine translate stuff on demand, and you start to reach across language boundaries, all of a sudden the searchability, the findability of that content becomes a critical quality metric, because if people can't find it, they can't use it. And so what I've seen over the last 3 or 4 years is that people are moving away from these very inward-looking definitions of quality, like what is in my style guide and what is in my, am I following what I think is in the Chicago Manual of Style, towards a very pragmatic, like Tex said, does generating this content in this format reduce my support calls? That's all that's important. That's your quality metric, right? Have you increased customer satisfaction, got more content to people faster? That's the important metric, and that's your quality metric. Nothing else really matters, how shiny it is or how, that is the metric. And I think that more customer-focused metric or customer-focused definition of quality is really healthy for everybody.
And the funny thing about that, just as an aside, the funny thing about that is if you're looking at findability, having errors is a good thing. SEO benefits, search engine optimization benefits when you have typos, misspellings, and sometimes incorrect or inconsistent terminology, because then people who are searching, who do the same things, are more likely to get hits to your page. So when you think of quality as the grammatical rules, that works against you. Following a style sheet, being consistent, absolutely works against you.
So tying what Andrew was just saying about having the right quality metrics back to what Tex was saying about we're not talking to the right people, I want to throw this to Loic. How, if you're coming into a development organization, do you get the attention of the right people, and how do you get the people who need to be paying attention to these things to focus on that problem?
You have several people with questions.
Yes, I realize that. Thank you.
So it all depends if we already have an existing relationship with those people within Intel, or if we start anew. I mean, if we have worked together in the past, we pretty much know who we can count on and can work with as an ally within the development team or the management team. If it's brand new, we just start building the relationship. We start from the basics. We use tools to get an idea of the scope of work we have ahead of us, and then we explain what it is that we do. We go through a lot of education, a lot of providing some very basic data to the development team, to the manager on what it's going to take, what we want to do and why. I'm not always trying to explain that they make my life miserable. That's pretty much what it is oftentimes, but we try to explain to them how we can work together in a better way that's mutually beneficial. And hopefully we get there.
I ended up in this to the forum moment, but I want to follow up on one more thing. Adam, in your talk, raised some kind of scary numbers, like $100,000 per 100,000 lines of code. And I think probably most of us in the room who have software as part of our portfolio are talking about looking at a lot more than 100,000 lines of code. So these dollar signs are what we keep getting pushed back on. How do you get the go-ahead for that kind of funding? You've said that Richard is miraculous at this, and Richard, reveal your secrets. How do you do it? At Cisco,
Let me just back up. That actually diminishes as your code base gets larger, quite a bit. But the problem is that it's not a $20,000 solution. It's going to be a number of man years of effort in money to often get a large, complex product that hasn't been internationalized all along. Maybe it's got a few years into it or whatever. It's going to take some man years to do it. It's not going to, at least in expense, not maybe in time, but in duration, I should say. But it will take man years to get it done. So that's always, man years have zeros.
And how, Richard, do you loosen the purse strings?
There is no, if there were a secret, I'd patent it and make some money off. we were fortunate when we got started in the telepresence at Cisco in that it was fairly new. It wasn't totally new. It would have been better to start at the beginning. But we had reasonable people, intelligent people that knew what it would take and would not allow us to develop a product that would actually, as one of our execs put it, he doesn't want to be embarrassed in any language. So they were very much behind it. They also recognizes that they didn't have the manpower in-house to stop and back up and take care of it, and that if I needed to get it done with the current staffing, then you're going to have to give me your best engineers on every piece of your code and give them to me for 6 months or more, and then I'll get it done. Or you can let me outsource it, and I'll try to get it done the right way, and that's the way we went. Because we couldn't stop code development. So it wasn't that actually that difficult. They're reasonable people, they understand, or at least maybe I got very lucky. Our executives understood that nothing was free, and that if you wanted it done and you wanted it done right, we ran through an analysis of the code, we knew what needed to be done, the plan looked very good and simple, and you apply for the funding and you get it.
When you did your initial analysis, did you use a tool like Globalizer?
That's exactly the tool I used.
Exactly the tool.
And that was cheap in the long run. The cost it took to analyze the entire code was minimal. They came to the office, they went through the code, they ran it through Globalizer, they say, here's where your weaknesses are, this is what you've got to do. So we looked at it and we said, fine, show us a plan on how you could make it work, because I knew I wasn't going to get all of the very best engineers in the company that was doing telepresence to stop developing new code. So
Can I say one thing that Richard does? When he asks for, when he puts something through, this was your words, you told me that one of the things he always does is he includes a line like, if you don't give me this, if you don't get this going, this is the consequence. And it seems like a simple step to you.
That's true with all budgeting. When you apply for budgeting, you know what needs to be done, you spell it out, you've got a very good idea what it's going to cost to do it. But when you submit that budgeting, you better also put in, now if we do not choose to fund this, this is the consequences, that this is what we cannot do. So then it's a simple decision, do I spend the money or do I not? Can I do without that and save the money? Maybe we better spend the money and get it done.
So you take a carrot and stick approach.
No. just the carrot. Just reason. Logic and reason.
Just got a quick question again about the, Martin Schnickel with Emerson Network Power. A question about the quality assurance. Some people, I'm not sure if I understood this correctly, we're talking about content and others were talking about structure. Obviously both need to be addressed. But one, we're talking about internationalization of code, which is obviously, to me, is a quality factor. If you can't change the calendar setting, that's a quality problem. But that's more on the internationalization side, where you can use a tool like Globalizer to help you do that. On the linguistic side, where you mentioned, one of you guys mentioned the fact that, well, I just wanted to get the message. It doesn't really matter how it's written. That might be true for you, that might be true for me, but the marketing guy that is working on this glossy brochure, or the tech writer that's writing the manual, might have a different idea than the developer that's writing the code and maybe the string that shows up in the UI. So how do you bring all that together? Not regardless of where you're plugged in the organization, but how do you get all these people to agree? Because the message at the end of the day is supposed to be consistent.
That's a really good point. I mean, to say that you need to have we talk all the time about consistent customer communication. That's kind of what our slogan is. But it's not. That doesn't mean that all the content that the customer interacts with needs to be the same. Of course, you need messaging to be tight. Everything needs to be on message where that's appropriate. But if you're writing some piece of content about how to apply a patch to a 4-year-old version of the product that's installed on a Unix system, and you have to do it via the command line interface, then actually branding and messaging at that point for that engineer is not the critical point. the point is that they have the steps outlined in such a way that, first of all, they can find how to do that, and secondly, that they can have the steps described in such a way that they get the job done without it going wrong. So there are different guidelines, there are different constraints that you have, different quality standards that you need for different types of content for your through the life cycle of the product and through the customer experience with the product. And of course they need to be kind of consistent, but they're different.
So maybe I can just add a short question to that then, to extend on the content. So how do you, just interested to hear some ideas, how do you assure the quality of your content? It's easy when you, sorry, let me rephrase that, nothing is easy of course. If you're using Globalized to analyze your code, you will find issues with hard-coded strings, over-localization, under-localization, yada, yada, yada. But it's not going to tell you that you misspelled something. It's not going to tell you that it's inappropriate language. Internationalization issues, you do the internationalization testing, pseudo-localization testing, you find these issues. You can have measurable measurable data to see what you did, but how do you do it with content? Other than having your local sales guy reading the manual.
By Acrolinx is one way to do it. I'm sorry, I mean I can't, I have to hit that one out of the park. I mean that's what we do, that's what our software does, it's all our software does. I don't believe there's any, I mean I started out life as a content person. The reason I got into the technology is I don't believe you can do this stuff without technology support. I don't believe that however much training you have to your teams, you have distributed content team. I mean, content for me is the entire customer experience. It's UI string in the product, it's the marketing, it's the technical publications, it's the support, it's the entire user experience with the product. And you can't do that, you can't bring that together without a tool to support it. However good your team is, and however much you train them, you can't do it without tool support. That's why we built a tool to do it.
Actually, Andrew, I don't know how many people are actually familiar with your tool. Do you want to just give 1 minute, like a brief crash course?
Acrolinx is Acrolinx IQ. The product is designed to help companies get their customer communication consistent. So it's basically a way of managing standard quality standards like spelling and grammar and the kind of best practice in the way you communicate, but also terminology, all the aspects of terminology, from technical aspects of terminology to the translation, the building of glossaries and things, and then moving now into things like searchability, findability, improving the way that your content can be indexed by search engines, but also indexed by your internal search resources, and trying to we build a platform which allows you to state what your standards are for quality in a very pragmatic way, and have those then deployed across the company. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do is basically help, once you've worked out what it is that you have as quality issues, to help you fix those.
It's not lost on me that we have a panel of 5 men. I'm the token woman, that's why I'm in drag, so I blend in. I'm now going to throw the next several questions in an affirmative action move to women.
Thank you. It's ironic because I'm
your name is
women in localization.
Give a plug for that, why don't you?
So I'm Sylvia Avery and I work for Semantic. And I just want to throw something out there and hear your thoughts. Tex, you mentioned, the content creators are here, the localizers are there, and I kind of see the same thing. I know there are some exceptions, but for the most part, you have a QA team doing the mechanical QA, and then you have the linguists that are doing the linguist QA. So they're looking at the site and trying to get to, several different screens and look at everything. And to me, sometimes it seems like a waste of time and effort, because you have 2 separate groups that not always communicate, and one is only reporting on mechanical bugs, and a lot of times they're reporting on bugs that are not actual bugs. They're saying there's a space here where it's supposed to be a space there, and then you as a localization manager are wasting your time telling the QA people, this is supposed to be there, don't file as a bug. And then the linguists here, God bless them, but a lot of times they're kind of blindfolded. They don't know how to get to the other screens, and those two teams don't seem to be in peace, and they don't talk much. So what are you seeing out there? Is there, a light at the end of the tunnel where maybe we can have one QA team with linguists, or QA people that actually speak the language so that they can do that one? What are you seeing out there? How people are working, or there's no way?
I think
it has to be that way.
the separation is in part because it's different skill sets, but you pointed a lot of legitimate issues. And some of the solution is the functional QA folks, as a part of developing their test suites and developing automation for that, should also be designing the automation in such a way that it helps the linguistic QA folks to be able to navigate through the product easily. And I'm sure some of you have tools that either, as a part of going through the QA, it'll generate at least screenshots, make it easier for the linguistic QA folks to see all of the different aspects of the application. But fundamentally, it's two different skills. It would help if they work together. And there's an argument there, certainly, for maybe at some points in the project for the linguistic QA folks and the functional QA folks to powwow on, tell us what you do, what are you looking at, let us tell you what we're doing, let's see how we can help each other. Even if you're in separate groups, you can still talk to each other and bridge that gap. Beyond that, I think the tooling from one can help the other, and certainly the linguistic QA folks or the people managing the linguistic QA should be making requests about tooling and things that make the process easier. But what the linguistic QA folks do is a very different job than the functional QA folks.
Richard and Loic, are you doing anything?
Yeah, so we have been dealing for years with a QA group where we mix people with language skills and they do the functional QA as well. It has kind of worked, but it has never been extremely successful and satisfactory for us. So we're looking more now to go with technically skilled people who are taking charge of the functional testing, mechanical testing as we called it initially, maybe using some tools like things like, I don't know, Branch Shadow, for example, which will generate screenshots, which can be given to linguistic reviewers who can find what is wrong in a series of screenshots, where we know that they will see everything because we will generate every single screenshot in the application. It has proven to be very difficult for us to get people who are both skilled as the technical aspect and the linguistic aspect, especially when you deal with 40 languages. And we're based in Portland, in Oregon, so I mean it's a small city. I mean you have a lot of trouble to actually source people who are covering all those languages locally. So for us to work with actually good linguists, overseas who can review the product, even if they don't have access to it and we don't need to know the product, we find that somebody who knows a technical piece of software can go through it very quickly. They can figure out by monitoring 12 or 16 screens which language failed a specific step and basically issues bug for this. It's way more efficient for us.
Richard, how is this working at Cisco?
Well, again, we're just getting started in it, but one of the things our localization program manager has come to us and asked us to do is stop testing in English. And of course, you start by saying that to my QA team, and they said, well, one of them can do Korean for me, one of them can do Japanese for me, but what he's referring to is you just pseudo-localize your code if you want to find internationalization and localization quality problems. For the localization part, I am also, I've got a lab set up in Ireland where I have a localization vendor that has got all of the equipment set up there. They understand and know telepresence, and they're able to test for localization.
Question from another woman. Yeah.
My name is Satio Denise. I'm with Nikon Precision Inc. Regarding to definition of quality and also actual quality check, I have a question about communication. We mainly treat Japanese as a source language and translate into English when original products written in source language. It has a lot of problems, but okay for Japanese folks. Then come to translation, no way to translate, and during the translation or before the pre-processing stage, we find many bugs. We try to give feedbacks, but we do not have a good systematic feature, something like software, communication software or anything. And even though we feedback that information, the source language side doesn't care because it's not their problem. And also in terms of definition of quality, linguists have their own idea. They want to write the language in their own way. Customer has different expectations. For customers, what they want is accurate information. But sometimes definitions are there, but communication is a big issue. And I'm not sure who would be the person, best person I should ask, but how do you deal with this kind of communication issue and when each department thinks as a kind of silo?
Does Acrolinx run in Japanese?
We do support Japanese. Yeah, we have quite a few customers both in Japan and here using Acrolinx for Japanese. But I think the issue is more one of how you present these issues. I can imagine if you call up and say we've got a translation problem and we'd like you to address it, you're more likely to get that. Oh, we don't have time for that. It's not our job. We hear a lot of that. I think it's probably more helpful to address it. In my experience, they're actually not translation issues. They are issues in the content that happen to come out more clearly when you translate it, but they're actually issues in the content, and they will come out. They will come out in all sorts of other places. They'll come out, for example, when you're looking at branding and messaging for that content. Is that the image we want to project for this company with this kind of content? The same with searchability. I know that to some extent, as far as metadata and as far as some of the keywords that you want to propagate around your content, you do want some of these misspellings and things. But in fact, you want to be sure that the keywords in your content, that they are written correctly and spelled correctly, because that has a direct impact on the way the content is searched. So there are other reasons that are not related to translation, where you can say this is a quality issue, in the sense of this content is not working for me, and this is reflected in translation, but it's reflected in all sorts of other places as well. And if we don't fix it, then we're not doing a good job. I mean, you're not doing a good job. It's not that I can't do my job properly, it's just that this content is not good enough. Translation's just a symptom of that. It's not like you're just doing this for translation.
I have a question for the room. In how many organizations here, stand up if the answer is yes, do you track linguistic issues and localization issues, and et cetera, in a system that's separate from the way you track any other kind of defect? One person is honest.
Well, we do both.
You do both.
Because we outsource the localization work. They have the separate bug tracking system that's then fed back to
And it does come back into your system?
To our Bugzilla system, and that's where some of the bugs get fed in. The localization bugs stay separate, though, with the vendor if they don't require work on our part, on the engineering part. That's why it's separate systems.
Okay. Everyone else is tracking international defects in the same system as any other kind of defect?
Well, what do you mean, international?
Oh, wait, you just said language, sorry. That's
Well,
two things here.
We do the same thing that the gentleman was mentioning. We track the localization, the pure localization defects that our vendor are responsible for. We track them separately. We don't bring them into the core bug database because it clogs up the system and makes people confused when they're seeing things they don't need to handle. It's not good in a report to see a ton of Arabic translation defects, for instance, going in with high severity bug problems of different severity. So that's why we track them differently also.
What about errors in your source content that are discovered by the process of internationalizing, localizing, globalizing, et cetera? Are those tracked in the same system, or are they somehow
In the
different?
process, I mean, when we're getting ready and we're developing it, we'll probably track those with the vendor, but once it gets out in the field and the customers see it, that's where we determine quality, because quality is like beauty, it's in the eye of the beholder. And if a customer sees this and finds it as a problem, they will be able to open up in the same bug tracking system. They will report the error, and we'll enter it in our bug tracking system and get it fixed. If that means we have to open up another one in the vendor's bug tracking system, we'll do it and we'll link them together.
Another question from the floor? Yes.
I just wanted to, hi, my name is Talia Boho from Copius, and I just wanted to add kind of onto the last comment and more focusing on the content management, is that from what I'm seeing in the industry, the main problems are in process and fragmentation. So a lot of, especially with content creation, we have headquarters and there are regional sites. Content is fragmented. It's a lot of times recreated in regional markets. We have the SEO department. We have the designers that do sometimes, SEO sometimes is not affiliated to. So key source words are not always affiliated to the copywriters. We have the health content writers. We have the marketeers. So very, very different functions that are typically on the corporate side involved in the content creation that are not necessarily working together, certainly not across the different offices. And what happens a lot of times is that the localization step only is introduced much, much later. So these guys are not even involved in the localization plan. The folks that are involved are, the localization management, and then that's after the effect, after the source content had already been created, after the designers had already worked on their outline and their logo and images. So that's one problem, and another is the process, is that I'm not seeing, in some companies I'm seeing it very well fitted, but in most companies there really isn't that systematic, streamlined process across the different sites and across the different divisions to really work together at the outset, so that on the source English or Japanese or whatever source language it is, to really build it from start and throughout.
Well, I think Talia is absolutely right about the process, but I think also when we talk about this, not every piece of content is the same. And in part because we talk in generalities. We have this process and we have all this content and we want to fix the problem generally. We lose track of the fact that some documents are much more significant. So you were right to point out, if you have the marketing brochure, the announcement for the product, that's a key document of which there's a few. That has to be absolutely right. That's going to get special attention. And it's not the same as you have your support database, your knowledge base, lots of documents in there. There's erroneous content, and there will be erroneous localizations. And you can't color them all the same way. And in part, when you ask for budget, when you say, I want to do something to fix this, people think about the whole set, and you ask for a large budget, and so to clarify my point, when I said for some execs, quality doesn't matter, because they're thinking, well, I've got a lot of stuff, and it's okay if it's not all accurate. If you were to say, when your next marketing announcement goes out, that has to be right, well, absolutely, but that's not, although the tools and process help that, everyone also knows that that's going to get special attention anyway before it goes out. So you can't color them the same way, and it also makes a difference what your products are. So if you're Cisco and you're talking about hardware specs and very important numbers and details in those documents, those have to be right, and I know Cisco works very hard on that. It's not the same as some of our software products or how we describe some of the screens for our products. And there are areas that have to be absolutely right. There's a lot of stuff that says it's kind of like this, and people will get the idea when they use the product. Or corrections will be dealt with in other ways. So as we think about this, you really have to think about how much what you're asking for, what you're trying to fix, and how important is it, and if you can target particular areas, certain kinds of content that has special needs, you distinguish either the product areas, the nature of the documentation, then you can get more attention to it, and also it's the right thing to do to spend more time on process and tooling, and to get quality for certain materials is not the same as all the others. If you do a broad brush, then you're going to have trouble winning because not everyone is going to appreciate where the benefit is versus, well, it seems like a lot of expense to boil an ocean, which I really don't care what the temperature is. Does that help? I didn't quite address yours, but I wanted to also just clarify that and also not have my comment about asking for quality, just, you know, make it seem like quality doesn't matter anywhere.
Time out for logistics. We got started late because we were running over a little bit. Now is technically the time to be breaking for beer and wine and those other things that people drink that aren't beer and wine. Do you want to go a little longer on the panel, or do you want to stay on schedule? In favor of going a little longer, 10 more minutes? Okay. Clear majority.
I'd say one comment.
You didn't ask us.
Okay.
You want to be here.
Would you like to go longer?
No.
Okay, they're going to break for beer and wine.
I would have one comment on what Talia said. I think that a lot of people underestimate the social and political aspects of this within the company. That we often find ourselves introducing departments who genuinely don't know each other. They don't know who the person is to speak to in the other group about the words and phrases that they use and how that impacts on these other groups. And so getting those people in a room, and we do it on a regular basis, that we actually try to organize a forum inside the company for all the different people who are looking after words and phrases in the company for some reason. And we say, well, wouldn't it be good if you shared the words and phrases that you're looking over here? You're managing customer engagement and you're looking at trending topics. Meanwhile, these people over here are doing keywords, and they're talking to their regions about the keywords that are important in the regions. But they're passing emails with Excel spreadsheets in them, and these people are collecting them in some web analytics tool. Meanwhile, the people over there in translation are building glossaries using something else, and they're just not connected. And then, unless those systems are, unless the people are connected, the systems won't be connected, and then there's no chance of you being able to deliver a consistent customer
Exactly,
experience.
they all want to connect, they're just not, there isn't a process. That's what I inferred when I was saying process, because obviously there are different processes, but as far as on the organizational level, again, it's a political issue, and it's also an issue of where localization is structured within a corporation, right?
And I'm a huge believer in these. You solve these by people and processes, not by technology. But it turns out that you can't get those people and the processes in place without an infrastructure, without a technology infrastructure to be able to say, what can I just make the list of things that I'm working on transparent to other people? Because if they can see them, then they can react to them and they can start to join in the validation of those things. But unless they can see them, and that means an infrastructure, then you can't put a process in place.
I'll end my affirmative action program with the gentleman in the back.
Actually following up on this one, by going on the technology side, third-party tools versus internally developed tools. You know, it's my observation now, after doing this for quite a while and working with many different companies, is that there's a disconnect, as you know, with the people, the different departments, but also on the technology side. And I think that's a mistake also. The internally developed tools that I've seen tend to be, you know, for localization, so being used by the localization department, tend to be actually more like developer tools. That is, I was, you know, the luckiest person at one company where I had engineers on my team. And we ended up developing the tool over, let's say, 2-3 years. It ended up, you know, it was first to, you know, create our database and, you know, to have translations stored. But it ended up being the tool for the developer to write, for the writers. They were actually, we wrote it so in such a way that was used by writers, the ones that actually wrote the content, but this was the English content, it was the French and the German and so on. And also a QA tool, was attached to it. So that it was used then ended up being used by the QA team, had the features that we need in localization, like taking screenshots and so on. So I think I haven't seen much change on the third-party side, really developing something that is really either linked a lot more to developer tools or has more look of a developer tool. Because I think that's one of the solutions, is if you actually have localization part of software development. I think that's sort of like an end goal I would have in a company. That localization is that we do the localization, but we do software development. It's the international part that we also do. So it's actually part of the group. My team members were members of this development teams. So the question would be, for Lingoport and so on, is there, is that it that we can do on third-party tools? That we just have to have the tools separate from development tools? Or where is that going for the next 5 years or so?
It's actually going in a direction that you'd like a lot. Is anybody here familiar with what Eclipse is?
What?
Eclipse? Okay. Development environment. So if you're a non-developer, think of as Eclipse. If you write documents, maybe use Microsoft Word. Eclipse is an environment to develop software, and particularly popular in the Java world. It's free. And it has all kinds of nice little add-ins to other developer tools, and there's this whole Eclipse ecosystem that includes source control and all this other good stuff. I know for us, we were probably a little slow in adopting it, but later this year, Globalizer, its whole front end, its whole UI will be an Eclipse plugin. So even if you don't use Eclipse, you'll still get something that looks like a developer environment. And if you use Eclipse, well, then you're really excited, because now the tool that you use all the time. Now, down the line, there's also the resource management. So, we talk about internationalization, then you have the resource management. And I think as you build that resource management to plug into that environment, there's a tool called Resource Bundler in the Java world. It's free. It's on SourceForge. I'm personally looking at that as a platform to expand on and make it part of Globalizer later this year. But again, that's the internationalization side. And then there's the content side. And it's going to be interesting, I would see, getting to the content side through partnerships.
I have long ranted at the industry that developers shouldn't be creating tools for localization. And I think, that, I'm sorry, Adam, but starting out to a localization audience and saying, look at Eclipse, and here we go. It's fine, but it's not really what the industry needs. First of all, writing up a ticket, a JIRA ticket or a bug ticket for a typo, what a tremendous amount of overhead, and it's absolutely right. Say, well, I'm going to enter a ticket, it's going to travel up and down through managers in order to get to a translator somewhere who's going to go, okay, I've got a typo maybe, should I address it? And then here comes the next ticket. What is it in dollars to deal with a JIRA ticket? What is it in terms of productivity and time? And often, when you find it on the screen, it doesn't even tell you which resource file or where it is. And if it's not a product issue, if it's a document issue, what a terrible way to go. The industry really needs some other kind of tooling. What you really want is, I'm reviewing this stuff, bang, 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 here's I found it. Other people are looking at it, they find it, and somebody gets, here's a bunch of annotations, is it real, should you fix it or not? And it's all in one thing they open once, not tracked the same way we track bugs. There's a tremendous need for tooling. Most of the localization tools, because they're designed for developers, really don't understand how translators think or work, or what it means to manage workflow, and so all these tools, sorry, I know there's a couple of folks here who have developing tools either in-house or externally, but we really should be taking a step back and rethinking how we do these things. And I've been saying that for 20 years, and from time to time I've worked on it, contributed to the problem, because I come at it from a developer's mindset myself. But you guys should all be ranting and raving at the industry and go in the Loic world and when you talk to the vendors, say, you know what, this is all junk, it's not the way I think, you guys have to go find out what I want to do and help me with these productivity issues, and don't onesie and twosie me when I really need to do a whole bunch of stuff all at once. Give me scalable solutions.
I'm not sure I understand what that means.
How to do that? That's because you're a developer. The Loic folks all understand.
So to wind this up, unless somebody has a burning question that they really need answered more than they need beer. Yeah? Okay. Okay.
Slightly longer. I actually have a question for Andrew, if I can squeeze in a couple of minutes. I'm familiar with Acrolinx, and on the content side, on the linguistic side, of course, you know, the tool is strong. And I was wondering whether it also has a feature, or maybe in the future there is a plan to add a feature about the visual and culturalization, because I'm seeing more and more need for content goes hand in hand with the visual, and you know, whether it's graphics that are culturally inappropriate for a certain market and so on. That to me is a part of content, and it's not linguistic, but it is conveying content, and content conveyed through words and through text and through visual. Whether that is a tool that will be.
I think, I mean, in terms of the actual images, that's not something I could see an easy way to do. But there are a whole range of things we do in terms of the rendering of content, the way content is delivered, in terms of its look and feel. But I mean, we're doing more and more with Ditto, we're doing more and more with string constraints inside. We have an Eclipse plugin, for example, for people developing, to give engineers direct feedback and content issues that happen in strings that they create. But with images, unless you can formulate, it's easy as a human to look at something and say that's inappropriate. But it isn't easy, but it's possible if you have guidelines. But the guidelines aren't something you can formulate.
Well, you can have libraries of, you know, symbols and certain things. I mean, it requires creating the database.
Yeah, but even identifying those images, identifying those symbols inside images is a very noisy process.
Aaron, I do need to clarify, I hope it was clear to everyone that the kinds of tools I'm talking about have to do with bug tracking and maybe workflow, and certainly not Globalized or Acrolinx, because they do their jobs. I see heads are nodding, but it occurred to me when I was damning the tools industry that I needed to make some exceptions there, but you knew which tools I was.
So to wrap things up, I'd like to quickly try to maximize everybody's value from this. I know when I'm attending these things, I'm always looking for those zingers that I can use when upper management asks me the ridiculous questions, like why do I need to localize and everybody speaks English and so on. So let's see what our panel can come up with in those responses that we always think of 10 minutes later. What do you say? When? We don't need to localize. They already speak English. Anyone? Go.
Lingoport gets a lot of customers who, not a lot, but there's a few a year that have never, ever internationalized or localized, and I always end up giving them a little bit of a lesson on how localization works. Often, you know, it's the VP of engineering, he gets software development, but they don't really get how localization works and how that language isn't just language, it's sort of the application of where it is and what it looks like, and you know, the localizer is sitting there, the translator is sitting there and seeing like strings out of context and all that. And we talk about how that, and the analogy that I always use is, would you want your product to read like a funky Chinese menu? Because everybody gets that. You know, yeah, the funky Chinese menu is translated to English, but it's like that. So if you're not localizing and building a process around actually delivering that localization, not just the development, but the localization. You're going to get a Chinese menu or an English menu at a Chinese restaurant that, you know, is kind of humorous and it's kitschy, but you know, you kind of probably don't want your product looking like that. And so the answer is, if you're going to do it well.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, but that's not really answering the question.
No, it's not. I was asking for a zinger.
That's how to do it,
Well,
not what, that's how to do it, not why.
You know, I guess, you know, I kind of feel like...
You gave us our zinger. You gave
Yeah.
us the zinger. You
Go
want
to-
your product to be like one of those Chinese menus. Here's another one. Tex, you talked about having a travel budget and going and seeing what the problems are. What do you say when they say you can't have a travel budget because they're all coming here at the headquarters thing next month? What's the
Well,
answer?
I'm perfectly fine if they're all coming here next month, because I still get to talk to them. And as a part of talking to them, if I can suss out some issues which might justify further exploration and go into market, that's fine. And to the extent that problems are only discovered after the product is released, after people come visit and you show the value of the communications, then you can start to use those examples as a way to justify, you know what, we can wait for them to come in a year, or we can go and have me do some investigation up front, and also maybe show them some of the things that we have in development, get feedback on that, and the like. So usually you can make some kind of case. And then ultimately, if I'm trapped in an office trying to do, now for what I do, which is internationalization, but also understanding, I try to pioneer some features and work for companies that are pioneering things. If I can't go into market, then I'm not in a company where I can do my job. So for me, it's a deal breaker.
Okay, this one's for anyone on the panel. What do you say to the ones who you're talking about the need to localize and the need to get this market and this language and that language, and they say that's just because you want more turf in your localization department. What's
Look
the
what
answer
the
to that one?
competition is doing. I mean, look what your direct competition is doing. Your direct competition is localizing their product that's competing with your product in that market. You have a very compelling case for localizing, because you will not compete with your non-localized product in a local market.
Okay.
And there, I mean,
We're
it's...
doing this fast. Lightning round. What do you do? You need the in-country reviewers. Japan wants this product translated right away. You say, great, we need people to review it. Suddenly they don't want it so much. What do you say to that? How do you handle that one? You need people, the local markets are asking for products to be localized, but they're not willing to be part of the process and help with the review work. How do you overcome that problem?
I can't give a one-sentence answer to that.
Oh, come
That's
on.
not a good one.
They don't want it that bad.
No, either you want it or you don't. If you don't want it, do it properly. If you don't want it, then we won't do it. If you want to do it, then we'll do it properly, and that's what it costs. So don't start picking off little bits and saying, I don't really need to do this bit. Can I do half of it? No, you can't do half of it. Either you do it or you don't do it. You do it only if there's a business case for it. I guess of all the people here, you're only translating about half the content that you actually produce in the company. So that half you're translating for a reason, and do it properly. Otherwise, it's not worth doing it at all. As Adam says, badly translated content doesn't really help you either. You might as well not bother.
I think it's time to break for drinks. Any objections? I'd like to thank our panelists, Richard Faubert